think that by one of your friends would you be able to be manipulated and coerced into murdering another one of your friends that you both share? Typically, the normal person would say no, which is what I'm expecting. But in The Secret History, that is not the case for the main character, Richard Papman. So the main character of the book is Richard Papman. He's from California, and he goes to the school in Vermont that's called Hampton College. And there, he wants to study Greek, but the Greek class is exclusive to Julian, the professor, and his 5 other students, and he doesn't enroll other students. But Richard eventually gets Julian to allow him to enter the class, and there Richard is kind of isolated from the rest of the student body because of the way of how like cliquey and like interconnected the group of the 5 students are, which are Henry, Bunny, or Edmund, Camilla, Francis, and Charles. And Camilla and Charles are twins. Those in Julian's class have to resign from all the other classes that are on the that aren't taught by Julian. The only classes that Richard still has that aren't taught by Julian are French classes, which Julian said to keep because he knew he wouldn't be as good of a French teacher as another person could be. But all in all, they learned. For a large part of the book is a lot of character building. In the beginning can be very slow, but eventually it does start to pick up, and and the writing is typically the type of book that you would get assigned in an English class. Like, it's not a very modern book. Like, you can tell that it was written some time ago. But even so, it's a very good book, and I actually really do enjoy the writing style, even though it's not my usual book preference. Though I would say that the beginning is like extremely long, and I need something that kind of like grabs me in like at first glance. But I heard that this book was really good, so even though it didn't, I still continued it, and I'm glad that I did because I actually ended up really enjoying the book. I rate the book maybe a 4.5 or maybe a 5 out of 5. Honestly, I feel like this is the type of book, for me at least, that I would have to reread again, because the book it like was packed with so much writing and information, and like even one page, like the words are very small in there, so it's a lot of like just words basically. Like, there's some moments in it where I don't truly see how that really connected to the plot or why that was relevant, but even so, I would still maybe rate it like a 4.5. But I feel like once I read it again, especially knowing what happens in the end, I think I could rate it a 5 out of 5. I definitely think that the book is worth reading. I would definitely recommend, honestly, anyone to read it, though I know that it's definitely not a lot of people's cup of tea. I feel like you have to have if you have a certain genre that you like, and like this genre is in, like, well, first and foremost, this book was extremely hard to find. Like, I went to probably like 3 Barnes and Nobles, and I got this book from Barnes and Nobles in New York, because everywhere that I went it was sold out. And also, like, the genre is psychological thriller, and that's not really like a category in bookstores, so it's kind of hard to try to pinpoint where the book would be inside of the store without you having to ask someone. But even when I asked someone, like, typically it wasn't in stock. Like, literally, when I did get this book, they brought it to me at the front. Like, I still don't know where this actually is inside of the bookstore. But if you're very like rigid in your book choices, I would say you may not enjoy this book. Like, if this isn't the type of book that you like normally like, and you have very rigid book choices and book preferences, then I say this probably wouldn't be your book. But I do suggest you to read it, and at least give it a try. And by give it a try, I mean read probably like the first 100 pages. By that, when I say give it a try, because when I say that the beginning is lengthy, it really is. And here is my 1-pager. So the book is The Secret History, as you know, and the theme that I chose is betrayal because of the way that the friend group is. Honestly, this is like the main theme. Like, as soon as I think of this book, I just think of the betrayal that happened between the 2 characters who in the beginning of the book, like, who were like best friends, ended up literally being like enemies in the end. Not even in the end, in the middle of the book. And I chose psychoanalysis as a literary theory. Honestly, it could be argued that you could also do queer theory, feminist theory, or Marxist theory. I feel like these all can play a part in it, and probably critical race theory too. These all can play a part in it. I just think that psychoanalysis theory like covers it largely, like on a large scale. The rest of those, not so much so. Like there's different like little aspects inside of the book that cover those theories, but I feel like this theory covers the majority of the book, because a lot of the book is about the characters' like psychological states. And honestly, in my opinion, I don't think you could ever really say that any of them were really mentally stable from the beginning of the book to the end. I feel like they all had problems. It was just the way that it was like brought out throughout the book almost. And how like where I said before, like how like the tension just snapped. Like I said, each of their minds come to a fragile pinnacle of how deep they are in their conflicts. So it gets really heated between every character, and there's like a lot of different dynamic shifts throughout the book. I chose psychoanalysis theory in the way that they all kind of like idolize their professor, at least. Also, this is all in Richard's point of view, so a lot of this may be skewed due to him like telling the story. But Richard seems like, as well as the rest of the characters, seem to idolize their professor, Julian. And Richard also seems to idolize his classmate and friend, Henry, in a way that doesn't seem healthy to me at all. And like the way that they all isolate themselves in the name of Julian's intellect and like what he knows about Greek literature. Like I get that he's a awesome teacher, but I feel like that isn't normal to want to be with one teacher all the time. And I don't think it's healthy either, because I feel like you deserve to have other learning styles and other teachers, because I feel like every professor can teach you something new that another one wouldn't be able to do. Now for quotes, I have, "Well, of course I do too," said Henry matter-of-factly, "but not bad enough to want to go to jail for it." And I feel like here was like the moment that I really realized that Henry was, I think he's either a sociopath or a psychopath, and there's not really a difference between them, actually. I learned in my psychology class, but I believe that was that kind of like took me aback when I read that quote. So that's why I put it there. And then I have, "The word mutilated had electrified me." And this is where I can't say exactly what this means, but this is where you kind of see like the small difference between Richard and the rest of them, but this difference kind of like dissipates. Like it's not there as like it was before, when what was that, page 312. Like before, you would probably could argue that Richard wasn't like the rest of them, but by the end of it, you could see that there's a large similarities between all of them, and that Richard honestly fits in pretty well. That was actually a personification. And then another quote is how he said, "Can I possibly make the Dean of Studies understand that there is a divinity in our midst?" And here again, this is Henry, and he's actually talking about his teacher or his professor, Julian, and calling him a divinity. And if that doesn't seem like it's idolizing him, I don't know what does. Another quote is, "Nobody else was falling apart." And this is another difference where you can see the difference between Richard and the rest of the classmates. Here, Richard, after Bunny's death, he was going through it a lot, but also this may only be, we may only have thought of this right then because of, again, he's the narrator. So of course we're gonna get his emotions and feelings like way more than the other characters, until the other characters reveal themselves how they feel about the situation. And later on, we do see how it affected the other characters, but at the beginning, like right after the death here, Richard was feeling very like alone and isolated. And then another quote was, as if we were plotting not the death of a friend, but the itinerary of a fabulous trip that I, for one, never quite believed we'd ever really take. And here, I think this is where Richard understands that, like, what exactly he did when he participated in the murder of Bunny. I don't think he really understood the, like, gravity of the situation initially, which is insane if you think about it, because how don't you understand that you participated in a murder? But here, I think that's when he really understands, like, exactly what he did, and again, a difference between him and his friends, or those that he thought were his friends. And this is why in my picture I drew like a split between Richard and the rest of the group, because it shows that Richard, like, was very, like, he wanted to be a part of their group, and he got in the group. But I feel like once he did, he realized that there was a difference between them, not only through wealth, but just through, like, psychological standpoints. And then for one of the techniques, I already said the personification one, that was the mutilated one. It is the cherry juice had left a splattered red trajectory on the snow, and that was symbolism. And I don't really want to get into how that symbolism, because I feel like it's a little gory, so I'm not going to say it right now. And also, speaking of that, I would definitely say to check trigger warnings before reading this book, because it's kind of heavy, and I feel like if you're not prepared for it, like, you shouldn't read it. Yeah, and I feel like you should be maybe like 16 if you read this, maybe a little lower, maybe like 14 maybe, but yeah. And then the character that I chose was Henry Winter, and I defined him as observant, idolized by Richard, a leader, non-present sometimes. Sometimes it seems that he's like living in the past almost, or not living in the past, but he takes things that happened in the past with like so much like gravity that he doesn't understand that there's also a present. And then I also define him as stoic, a manipulator, smart, and then sociopath or psychopath. And then the picture, another explanation on the picture, these are the original 5 students, and that's Richard. And then we have the other side to show like the actual truth of their friendship that most people don't see, almost like the upside down in Stranger Things. That's kind of what I was going for. So yeah, but that was me reading The Secret History, this book talk, and I would definitely say that I'm gonna read this book again to further understand it, because honestly it was a heavy book for me, and I think that if I read it again, I feel like I'd be able to understand and summarize it more on an on-depth level, because right now I feel like I can't really say much without like spoiling something. But yeah, sooner or later I'll be able to. So yeah, thank you.